Dear viewers, welcome to Your Voice, a TV program brought to you by Journalists for Human Rights, JHR, in collaboration with South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation, SSBC. In this program, we strive to bring you human interest stories with an aim of making a positive impact on the lives of viewers and the sources who share their stories. To discuss this in details, I am glad to be joined by a gender activist who is also a health minister for Jonglei State, Rachel Amor. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Before we can go deeper into the discussion, let's take a look at the first story, which is the story of Nazreen. Nazreen, 20 years old, dropped out of Komboni Secondary School as a result of early pregnancy. After spending 1 year at home taking care of her baby, Nazreen says she wishes to resume classes, but her school's policy of non-readmission of pregnant girls or childbearing students prevents her from continuing with her studies. Speaking to one of the Voice reporters, Nazreen expressed her disappointment with the system, in tears dropping down her face. The biggest question that every layman or laywoman watching this program would be asking right now is, what could Nazreen do to resume her studies? Good thing I have a gender experts with me in the studio to answer some of these questions. But first, let's take a look at the story of Nazreen to witness her ordeal.
The United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals call for the elimination of gender disparities in education and ensuring of equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for the vulnerable. However, in South Sudan, these efforts have been undermined by policies of non-readmission of pregnant or young mothers in some schools. Nazreen Charles, 20 years old, dropped out from Komboni Secondary School last year. Nazreen said she wants to go back to school, but not only does she lack financial support, but also she cannot be readmitted to her previous school.
If you give birth to a child, it doesn't mean that you can stay at home. Because education is everything to us. If you stay at home, you'll not have a better life in future.
In Komboni Secondary School, where she dropped out following her pregnancy, the school administration discourages readmission of girls who get pregnant before marriage. A senior teacher at the school, Joseph Gabriel Odingo, said Nazreen was a good student and she should get another chance at education, but unfortunately, the school does not allow readmission of girls like Nazreen.
Girls who fall pregnant incidentally should be allowed to come back to school. But as Komboni is a Catholic Church school, we cannot take her. This is an unfortunate thing.
But Nazreen's dilemma does not stop there. Even if she gets admission in a different school, her family cannot afford the cost. There are organizations that support girls in South Sudan to pay fees, educational material to allow them continue with school, but such funding are limited. Girls Education South Sudan, a UK aid project, funds several South Sudan organizations to help girls in South Sudan to stay in schools. However, Akucha Digarang, the project's team leader, said the support is only available to girls who are already enrolled in schools.
We target girls between primary 5 and secondary 4. And that small cash injection is supposed to help them to either buy shoes or uniform or a school bag.
Poverty has left many young girls vulnerable to exploitation and abuse in South Sudan.
As you go up the education ladder, you find that girls are dropping out more and more.
And for many girls like Nazreen who get pregnant, there are limited opportunities to return back to school. Such trends have robbed many young girls opportunity to access education, which violates their fundamental human rights. Reporting for Your Voice program, Clive John Ochaya, SSBC, Juba.
And that was the story of Nazreen, a dropout from secondary school. Honorable, you have seen the story of Nazreen, where she has a lot of potential to pursue her studies, but as a result of unplanned pregnancy, she drops out of school and unable to resume her studies. In such a situation, as we have seen in the story, where she wishes to continue, but the education system, the system of the school, does not allow ladies who got pregnant while they were students. In this situation, what can she do?
Thank you very much for calling me to contribute to girls' education. It's a little bit tricky because we are talking now about one school. What I'm seeing here, there are schools with some rules and regulations, their own policies, and there are government schools which I believe there are no such policy. I'm not a Minister of Education, I'm not expert in education, but as education is a basic human right. I don't think that it is a good thing to have a policy that prevents some people not to go to school, not to study. And also, first of all, in the school, there should be education on how girls protect themselves from school. In the school, not to get pregnant, and not only the pregnancy as well, but also how to be careful so that they don't end up with HIV, they don't end up with other sexual transmitted disease.
Yes, of course, not only there are so many girls who undergo the same thing Nazreen is going, but what do you think needs to be done to enforce what you just suggested so that the education system introduces how these young girls can protect themselves? Who do you think should champion that move so that the curriculum should introduce such systems?
Yeah, our government should change the educational policies. So our top leadership and also the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Higher Education should change their policies to include everyone. Even I've seen it sometime back in Kenya, and elderly people, they are going back to primary so that they get KCPE certificate. So why not in our country, if such cases are in existence, then the policy must be changed to include everyone so that we get this knowledge, because having educated girls is like you are educating a nation.
Good. Honorable, let's take a look at other stories also that we have compiled here. And in this story, we look at the laws that promotes girls' education and how they are implemented in South Sudan's education system. We also look at the causes of dropout among girls and how to prevent these rising threats. And our reporter Emmanuel Juma has more.
Gender equality and education is a basic right for every citizen. Despite that, many girls suffer to complete their education or access to get education opportunities. Girls in South Sudan face a lot of challenges to get education support.
The very most challenges that are facing us, especially with us, poor family. Others are having poor family, and their family cannot afford to give them what they need in a time.
Gismalla Abdullah, a teacher in Mahad Secondary School, said some families are playing a negative role effort to educate girls by pulling them out of schools and marrying them at an early age.
There are some families has role in the issue of young girls getting married early. And those families, they don't want the girl or the women to be educated.
To curb school dropout among girls, the government of South Sudan has developed partnership with international development organizations to support girl education in South Sudan. Girls Education South Sudan, a project funding by the UKAID, works in partnership with several educational organizations through a direct transfer of cash to girls in school.
And now, because the enrollment in the girls reduces down, and we find at last girls are not completing the primary cycle, so we were tasked to implement this, to at least increase the enrollment of the girls in the schools, retain them in the schools, and let them also complete the primary cycle.
Communities' attitudes towards girls' education has also contributed to high number of dropouts in South Sudan. Ahmed Mohammed Musa, chairperson of Education Committee and the Transitional National Legislative Assembly, say early marriage in South Sudan continue undermine girls' education in South Sudan.
الزواج المبكر بصراحة موجود بكثرة في جنوب السودان.
Honestly, the early marriage is everywhere in South Sudan, and this is one of the main reasons why girls are not completing their education. And the other reason is the traditions of the tribes in South Sudan is affecting too much the development of girls in terms of education.
الموجودة في جنوب السودان صراحة هي مؤثرة تأثير كبير في عدم تقدم الطالبة أو البنت في تعليم.
Competition grant from development organizations could only do so much to help South Sudanese girls staying in school. Emmanuel Juma, Your Voice, SSBC.
And another school dropout is Esther. Although she has passed the age of primary 8 students where she dropped out, Esther said she tried to go back to school unsuccessfully and now looking for a job in a market dominated by qualified and skilled women. As Emmanuel Duku reports, Esther has two messages, one to school-going girls to take their studies seriously, and another one to call on the government to support girls who drop out of schools by offering them alternative skills to support themselves.
Early morning in Juba, Esther, a mother of 5, goes about her choice, preparing her children for the day. It may seem like she's getting on well, but underneath, the hard work and pressure of motherhood. Esther is struggling to take care of her family. Esther was a prospective candidate in primary 8 when she dropped out. She was pregnant and family married her off. She now lives with her husband with 5 children. However, she cannot get gainful employment in the capital Juba without formal education.
I can't take care of home. Staying at home is difficult because I used to staying at my mother's house. Then staying at husband's house, I cannot also do proper work. We are cooperating good but no proper work. We were just waiting from the parents. If they give us, then we eat.
As a young mother, Esther struggled to raise her family. She said she was not ready for a parenthood, but pregnancy and circumstances at home forced her.
During delivery, it's too difficult. It took pain for 5 days because I'm young age. Even the doctors was not happy because I got pregnant at early age. But God helped me. I deliver in the end.
Esther works in a local hair salon in her neighborhood, but she barely makes enough to cater for her family basic needs and children's school fees. Esther is just one of the many women across South Sudan who drop out of school and turn to marriage. Many of them, like Esther, want to go back to school, but the current economic crisis has to make an attempt at adult education even difficult.
My message to my younger sisters, let them continue with their education. They can get married later. After you achieved all your goals, you will get a best husband while you're working.
South Sudanese across the country have faced hardship throughout the years of conflict. For many like Esther, a promise of peace and economic recovery raises hope for a bright future despite their education level. Emmanuel Duku, Your Voice, SSBC.
Yes, we have seen stories that affects young school-going girls in these two stories. One of them is talking about early marriage, which in most instances is also as a result of forced marriage. And we have seen the role that the Legislative Assembly can play in legislating rules and laws that are favorable to protecting the rights of these young girls. What do you think the communities need to do to shun away from early child marriages, and especially the forced marriage, which they see in their own tradition is something that they've been practicing it for years?
Yes, we will keep our culture So I will still emphasize on that. We'll keep our culture, but what we need to do, we need to modernize it a little bit. You know, take some of the things out and then take some of the good one from others. So our culture is the one that we are having earlier marriages. Myself, I got married when I was 17 years old. But it was not forced marriage. It is an arranged marriage. So it is negotiable. So people negotiate. For example, you know, why am I sharing my story? Is that I want other women out there to know that they are not by themselves, they are not alone, and you know, some people, they have been through what they are going through at the moment. So when I got married, I did not know my husband. I had another person that I was in love with. But when my husband came and talked with the family, I refused him for 2 years. But my family did not force me. They gave me time.
There is a blurry line here between forced marriage and arranged marriage. So can you make it articulately clear here?
For me, I don't know about the forced marriages. So I have no experience about it. And if it exists out there, then our people need to stop it, because sometimes it may not work for the girls, and there will be a lot of issues, because if she is forced to marry a certain person, this is why we are saying that we need to be valued as human, and we need to have to make our own decision, because it is the future of the girl. And sometimes, you know, to have a blessing, you need the family to support you as well. Because in case you never know what will happen in the future between you and the husband. So this is where the girl need the backup from their family.
Good. Let's continue looking at the other stories, and we'll pick it up from there. And gender parity is one of Sustainable Development Goals, which emphasizes on recognition of women's effort and promotion of their active participation in private offices or public offices. The highest law-making institutions in the land, which is the Parliament, holds the sole right to formulate laws favorable to gender equality. But according to Rejoice Bauda, a member of Parliament representing Mundri at the National Legislative Assembly, the constitutional provision for gender balance, which advocates for implementation of women quota at all levels of governance, remains in purpose. This, she said, is because men still dominate every sector under the pretext of lack of qualified women to assume these roles. Could that be the case? Let's find out in this story filed by Taban Juma.
Although South Sudan constitution provides for gender balance in public offices, women involvement in parliamentary affairs and committees remain undermined by held traditional beliefs and perception on the role of women. According to Rejoice Bauda, a current member of parliament for Mamadi State, the provision for gender balance has not been fully implemented. She also laments the unequal representation of women in specialized parliamentary committees.
Yes, we have challenges in the selection of members. If there are members need to be sent outside the country for the sake of training, sometimes representation of women is weak. If the committee should go with 5 members, you will find only 1 woman.
Rejoice, who chairs the Parliament Committee on Environment, Forestry, Wildlife Conservation and Tourism, says women in South Sudan Parliament can perform just as men. However, some women tend to shy away from responsibilities in the Parliament due to the traditional held perception on women's role. Despite the trend, women parliamentarians have formed Women's Caucus to advocate for more women participation, and the caucus has helped set up advocacy for issues affecting women in South Sudan like girls' education, through encouraging the dropout to rejoin studies at various levels of learning.
For example, I came to the parliament with Sudan secondary certificate, but I got the opportunity to go back to University of Juba with other colleagues. Majority of them are women. Some of them are still studying. Me and few colleagues, we got our diploma in 2010. And then we got the bachelor degree.
Women in South Sudan Parliament continue to have an impact in steering women's rights. Rejoice has been an avid advocate for women's rights in Parliament. She believes educating women and shunning negative attitudes should be a priority for the parliamentarians. She finds motivation from her experience in pursuit of education and challenges. She believes her hard work and determination has paid off, and she is supporting other women in South Sudan to shun negative attitudes against them. Taban Juma, SSBC.
Well, you have seen women complaining at the highest level of governance, that is the Legislative Assembly. The women in Parliament saying that they are not well represented. What do you make of that?
You know, when you talk about equal representation and people talk about equality, you know, you hear everyone out there saying that, what about 35%? They said you got 35%. Some they are still even denying it. They say 25%. We said, yes, we appreciate that 25%, but you know the empowerment of women, because from powerless to power, it's not only about 35%. It's not that about that being given a right to vote. We also need to, you know, to be given that authority and power to do some things. So now in South Sudan, yes, we have that 35 representation, but look, even in politics, it's 35%. But look at the population. Women are more than half of the population in this country.
In that story, in that particular story, the report says that the men who use the pretext of taking over the women positions says that most women who are in those positions or who are supposed to be put in those positions are not qualified and they cannot run those positions. And that some of them go as far as to the extent of saying that where these things are negotiated or discussed, the quotas, for example, the rights of women, there are women on those discussion tables, but they end up not advocating for the rights of women while they're on that table. What do you say to that?
So what is happening basically is just an ignorance in this country. Now I'm a Minister of Health and no one will raise his hand fit to say that she don't know what she's doing because she's a woman. Because I'm doing my job perfectly. I'm not a medical doctor, I'm an administrator, but I'm doing my job. So the real thing here is just a being negativity, just a stereotyping about that women, they are not qualified, they are not educated.
So what do you think should be done to solve this issue?
So what I think should be done, I think as women, we need to actually get on the social media to do more campaigns. We need to join sports so that we can share our experience and also gain that confidence. Because what women need is that naturally when we go to the history, women are intelligent. And look at this great example of Jesus Christ. When he first appeared after he was risen, Mary Magdalene saw him first, and not the inner cycle of men who were in the leadership. So already we have been honored by that as women, and that will guide us not only in the churches, but also in our families and also in workforce.
Well, Honorable Rachel, let's take a look at the other stories and we'll continue the discussion as each story passes. And we understand now that school dropout among girls leads to poor living standard. What we see in the next story is the effect of illiteracy among women and the challenges faced by matriarchal families or families that are headed by women. Betty Achan is a single mother of 6 children who lost her husband to 2013 conflict. Achan struggles to cater for the needs of her children by making tea on the streets of Juba. Sometimes she sacrifices her own needs to feed the children and send them to school. This, she said, it is important to give her children the life she couldn't afford to live. So Abdulaziz spoke to her.
Every day, Betty Achan, a mother of 6 children, travels to town to work at a local tea shop in Melekia. She lost her husband to the country's conflict in 2013, and like many women who who lost their partners to the conflict. Betty struggles to support her children's education, but the tea work is making a difference in her life.
I do work here not for myself, but I work for my children to pay their school fees and fulfill their needs until God help them to finish their school. Then they will know that their mother pays their school fee with a tea work. That's why I am struggling hard for them.
Betty says her children's education is important even at times of conflict. Despite the hardship, she has been working hard to invest in her children's education.
As a woman, you have to think day and night on what you can do for your children and how they can survive. Maybe you can rely to your man and you may think that your husband can help you in registering children in school. Sometimes a man can give money today and tomorrow it will not be there. As a woman, do any kind of work.
Siama Soro owns the tea business where Betty works. Siama says despite the conflicts, her business has been a success and she using her enterprise to support other women, earn income and cater for their basic needs.
These women are all having conditions. Some lost their husbands, that's why they are working here with me. I do advise them that tea is not bad. As you look at me now, my son has reached to university level with the same money of tea. I used to change pounds to dollar, then I sent to my son. No one knowing that I am doing this work and send my children to school.
In South Sudan, her economic situation has pushed the price for basic needs beyond reach of many. For women like Betty, catering for families' basic needs is even tougher. Suat Abdulaziz Suleiman, your voice SBC.
What do you think these widows need to be supported with so that they can build the lives of the people who rely on them, especially their children?
Yes, I myself, I was brought up by a single mother, and I have seen how difficult it was for me and for my mom as well. But I was lucky that I have access to education and to study and to be who I am today. So what should happen? The first thing that what caused these things, people to be orphan and to be widows, is that we are so grateful now to our government that they have signed the peace agreement so that we don't get more widows and more orphans. Because life is very difficult. I have seen women struggling with children. They cannot afford their school fees. They cannot afford to feed them. But in developed countries, for example, in Australia, there are supports from the government. There are programs to support the widows, to champion them for business opportunities. They give them grants, like a micro loan, to start their own businesses. As I could see before, some of them, they are interested in making business. So the government, I'm calling on my government to support the orphan and to support the widows. When they have business idea, instead of giving them, I've been to some of the big offices and you see a lot of women there, they are begging, they want money. Instead of being given that money, it would be a good idea to have a micro loan program and then link it with the chambers of commerce. So they will identify women who have business idea, and then the government will give that small amount of money. Then when this business is successful, the money can be repaid back and given to the next woman to start doing something.
Indeed, what you just said, this is a question that goes to everyone. What can we do? And it's not a question that should be directed to one single individual or an institution. This is an inclusive and cross-cutting issue that involves all of us. And this goes out to whoever is watching this program, that it is our role, it's my role, it's your role, and it's his role. It's our role to take a look at these issues critically and find a way of solving these issues that affects us. And this, Honorable, thank you very much, brings us to the end of our program, and I appreciate you for taking your time and coming to talk to us on these very critical issues on Your Voice. Well, viewers, this brings us to the end of our program of Your Voice, where we discuss issues and stories that touch people's lives. We'll continue to tell you more about these stories that are happening in this country, South Sudan. But in the meantime, I would like to leave it there. And thank you. And on behalf of the hardworking crew behind the making, I would like to wish you a very wonderful time. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.